you know, that was 20 years ago, and now I reflect back on it and the experiences and the people, and now for me, my reunions are starting, you know, and you go there and you say, oh, everybody's changed and things are different. But these are things that Angelo reflected on last Saturday. Up until I believe it was in the early 70s, he went to his Navy reunions. As he talked about his experiences, of course, some were very hard for him. Some brought a tear, some choked us up, and choked him up also. It was, the Pacific was a terrible time. As I learned more about military history in my own life, the Pacific was daunting because the emphasis was in Europe and all the resources were in Europe, but yet we sent our ships and our men and our women with very limited resources to the Pacific to fight that war. But interestingly enough, there's also times, we always talk when we conduct these interviews, we also there are times where was there a humorous time, Angelo? Was there something where, what did you do to relax, or what? And that always brings about various stories, and one of them I'll recount very quickly here. On April 5th, and this is a true story, very true. Ship was, the Desron 21 was returning from a night of shelling Japanese shore installations deep in the New Georgia area of the Solomon Islands. Our destroyer, Angelo's destroyer, the O'Bannon, as part of this force, picked up a radar contact that turned out to be a large Japanese submarine cruising on the surface and apparently unaware of our presence. The Japanese lookouts undoubtedly were fast asleep. We approached rapidly and were preparing to ram the sub. Our captain and other officers on the bridge were trying to identify the type of sub and decided at the last minute that it could be a mine layer. The sub could lay mines and therefore they would be going into a trap. Not wanting to blow themselves up along with the sub, the decision was made that ramming the submarine was not a wise move. At the last moment, the rudder was swung hard to avoid a collision, and we found ourselves in a rather embarrassing situation as we sailed alongside the Japanese submarine. On board the sub, Japanese sailors wearing dark shorts and dinky blue hats were sleeping out on the deck. In what could be considered a rude awakening, they sat up to see an American destroyer sailing alongside. Our ship, however, was far too close to permit our guns lowered enough to fire, and since no one on the deck carried a gun, not a shot was heard. Ditto on the Japanese sub. No one there had a gun either. In this situation, no one seemed sure of the proper course of action, and it appeared, and it probably would not have been covered in the manual anyway. Therefore, everyone just stared at each other, spellbound. The submarine was equipped with a 3-inch deck gun, and the sub's captain finally decided that now was probably a good time to make use of it. As the Japanese sailors ran toward their gun, our deck parties reached into storage bins that were located nearby, picked out some potatoes, and threw them at the sailors on the deck of the sub. A potato battle ensued. Apparently, the Japanese sailors thought the potatoes were hand grenades. This kept them very busy as they tried to get rid of them by throwing them back at the O'Bannon or over the side of the sub. Thus occupied, they were too busy to man their deck gun, which gave us sufficient time to put a little distance between our ship and the sub. Finally, we were far enough away to bring our guns to bear and firing commenced. One of our shells managed to hit the sub's conning tower, but the sub managed to submerge anyway. At that time, our ship was able to pass directly over the sub for a depth charge attack. Later information showed the sub did sink. When the Association of Potato Growers of Maine heard of this strange episode, they sent a plaque to commemorate the event. The plaque was mounted in an appropriate place near the crew's mess hall for the crew to see. It was the crew's battle. Well, Angelo, wonderful story.